No, your index.
They're really hot, so you're going to be
recording right now.
I want to be.
Almond left, leave your left hand. Anybody right, go right and left hand.
You go in and forward with this, you gotta go left and right.
Thank you very much.
This button here, honey.
I'm not sure. See? To the right, you go
The
in.
hand mic's off top.
Okay.
To the left, it comes back.
There's Senator Murray right there.
You guys have mic level sound? Yes.
Tell her to put her purse down. Richie, tell her to put her purse under the table. Or she doesn't need it.
Sorry, Jan.
Judy, so nice to meet you. Well, that's okay. It's important.
Try to relax.
This is freaking.
Oh my God.
Well, good morning. My name is Fred Applebaum. I'm the Director of Clinical Research at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center and the Director of the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. Lung cancer continues to be the leading cause of cancer death. And asbestos, in addition to leading to lung cancer and over 80% of cases of mesothelioma, also leads to other devastating pulmonary diseases. I want to welcome all of you, and particularly Senator Murray, to the Hutchinson Center today. We're fortunate that our own Senator Murray is a national leader in the fight to ban asbestos, invest in research and treatment, and protect families and workers. Today, she's assembled a few people here who can help talk about why this is so very important. On a personal note, I'm pleased to have colleagues from other institutions standing here with us to send the message that in this fight against cancer and mesothelioma and asbestos, we're all on the same team. I'm going to introduce Senator Murray in just a moment, and then we'll go from Judy Clausen, a patient from Aberdeen, Dr. Eric Valliere from the Switch Cancer Institute, and Bill Rogers, a law professor from the University of Washington. Senator Murray has worked hard in the Senate to boost federal investment in medical research. She's worked to reform and update the FDA to put critical advances in the hands of doctors and patients, and she's a leading voice for stem cell research. She's also been a great advocate for cutting-edge cancer treatments here at the Hutchinson Center. 6 years ago, she started her fight to ban asbestos, and this year, she is very close to making it a reality. We all sincerely thank her for her efforts. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Applebaum. It is really an honor to be here today
with the people that you see up here who know that we do need to do a lot more to protect America's workers and our families from deadly asbestos. I want to thank, first of all, Fred Hutch for hosting us today and for really being a leader in the fight against cancer. And I also want to thank all of our speakers who are here today to share their unique perspectives and to work and for their work in helping us to once and for all ban asbestos in America. Let me start by saying I got involved in this fight about 6 years ago after I read about the deadly toll that asbestos was taking on our families, on workers, on homeowners, and entire communities. And ever since then, I've been introducing legislation, demanding hearings, and trying to get Congress to act. Unfortunately, some of the great friends that I've got to know in this battle, advocates who've been working with us, who stood with me over the years, have now lost their lives to this deadly disease. I promised them each and every step of the way that I would keep fighting this until we got it done and passed legislation to ban asbestos. So that's why I'm here today. And it is very clear that banning asbestos and working to pass this legislation has been an extremely difficult and uphill battle. Many people today actually think that asbestos is banned in this country today. Well, it's not. And it is still imported into the United States in consumer products, in auto parts, and in construction material. In fact, this week my staff went to a local auto parts store here and purchased these auto brakes right off the shelf. These pads, and it says right on the package, contain asbestos. Right here, not very far from where we are today. Well, if a brake mechanic or a car owner didn't know and used these products, they could expose themselves to deadly asbestos. My staff went to another mechanic shop very close by, and they picked up a box, and it didn't say that it contained asbestos, but there was a warning on that box that poor ventilation may cause lung disease. So my staff member asked the young mechanic whether the product actually contained asbestos, and he said to her, and I quote, "The government banned asbestos years ago. The government banned asbestos years ago." Well, that is not true. We have got to stop using asbestos products and start warning the public, all of us and our families, and we need to invest in research and treatment of this deadly product. Our region, in fact, has been seriously impacted by asbestos exposure. According to the Environmental Working Group, which is a nonprofit environmental research organization that's based out of Washington, D.C., Washington State has the 8th highest incidence of deaths from asbestos-related exposures in the country. And if you just look at counties, King County has the 4th highest incidence of deaths from asbestos-related exposures in the United States. And if you just look at small cities across the country, Bremerton has the highest incidence of death from asbestos-related cancers of any small city in the entire country. So we are talking about a national problem that has a very local, painful impact. We know that asbestos exposure kills 10,000 Americans each and every year. In 2005, 2,500 metric tons of asbestos were used in the United States, and imports of products containing asbestos came in cement pipes, in tiles, in brake gaskets, and linings, and that importation continues unabated today. So to anyone who says we don't need a law, I would pose one question. How many more Americans have to die before our government finally does the right thing and bans asbestos? More than 40 other industrialized countries have already banned asbestos. I think America deserves the same protection. So I've introduced legislation, and it does 3 things. First of all, it bans asbestos. It prohibits the importation, manufacture, processing, and distribution of any product containing asbestos. Secondly, it really focuses on research and treatment that's badly needed. We create a $50 million 10-center asbestos-related disease research and treatment network, and create a new national asbestos-related disease registry. And we support research at the Department of Defense and launch a new study to determine the most promising areas of new research. And finally, my bill launches, importantly, a public education campaign so we can better inform Americans of the dangers of asbestos in the workplace, so some young mechanic doesn't accidentally use a product or tell someone who's purchasing it that we banned asbestos when we haven't. So this is very important legislation, and I'm pleased to say that we are finally making progress. After working on this for 6 years, for too long Congress has had the wrong priorities, but now Congress is starting to move in the right direction. In March, a few months ago, I introduced my bill and I chaired a hearing on it in my subcommittee. Then last month, for the first time, our bill got a full committee hearing before the Environment and Public Works Committee. And today I am very pleased to announce that after working with a number of stakeholders and senators on both sides of the aisle, the full committee will mark up and pass this bill out of committee later this month. That is a first for this bill, and I'm very excited about that. So we've got work to do. We're going to get it out of committee. We've got to get it to the full Senate floor and pass the House, but I am going to keep working on this. As I have told everyone who I've worked with who has this deadly exposure and disease, I'm going to keep working until this is signed into law. It is critical legislation, and we are making progress. We're going to keep working until we get it done. I'm very pleased to be here today with our speakers, but especially our next speaker, Judy. And Judy, I want you to know, for you and thousands of other Americans, this is one step in a long process. We're going to get there. So thank you so much for being here. Judy, you want to come over? You can sit right there.
My name's Judy Blackburn-Clausen. I'm from Aberdeen, Washington. I'm Native American from the Quinault Indian Nation.
Excuse me. I need you closer.
Okay, that's okay. Oh, okay. And I want to thank you for letting me share my story. I turned 44 5 days ago. I'll be lucky to see 45. August 2006, I was diagnosed with mesothelioma, caused by exposure to asbestos. I did not choose to be exposed to this deadly substance. I did not knowingly work in an environment such as a factory or handle asbestos in any form that I know of. There was no warning labels in my environment to let me know I was being exposed to asbestos, yet I have this disease through no fault of my own, and I will die. Treatment options are very limited. When I was first diagnosed, I started looking for treatment options. Found most oncologists in this area have never even treated someone with this fatal disease. Every day I have more pain. I can feel the tumors growing inside my chest, making it harder for me to breathe. And if it wasn't for the strong medication I was on, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. I often ponder and have all these thoughts going through my head. How many of you guys are going to be grandparents? How many of you envision the future with family gatherings with your growing children and their family? I want all these things and more. I want to see my sons get married. I want to see my grandbabies be born. And I want to see them grow up. Yet odds are we'll never realize these dreams, and to be honest, I'm angry. I'm very angry. I feel cheated. It is ludicrous that something deadly as asbestos is still legal in this country. That you know what kills, yet you continue to allow it to be legal. Why? How many people have to die before they do something about this? What will it take for you to take serious action to outlaw asbestos? That's it. I don't have much more to say. I just live one day at a time, you know. I'm not doing any kind of treatment. My options are I can do chemo, radiation, and probably only prolong my life for a month or two. So I choose just to live one day at a time and be happy and enjoy life. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Eric Valliere. I'm a thoracic surgeon oncologist, and I treat mesothelioma with surgery with the few individuals that are lucky enough to be diagnosed early in the course of their disease, to whom we can offer very aggressive surgical treatment with results that are hard to predict. I welcomed this bill. I welcomed it the first time we brought it to the table. I welcomed it the second time we brought it to the table. I had a patient that was very active with you in fighting this in DC, and I strongly support every aspect of this bill, from banning the product, from promoting research and treatment, because that's an area that's lacked big time. If you look at the numbers of dollars that have been invested in asbestos disease research over the last 3 decades, it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. So that needs to change. And I strongly favor as well that we educate the people. Everyone still thinks asbestos has been banned early 70s in this country. No, it hasn't. There have been some laws passed in the 70s, but there's still tons of asbestos around. And unfortunately, the effect of that, as far as mesothelioma is concerned, we won't see the end of that for 35, 40 years. That's how long it takes for the disease to appear in individuals that were exposed way back. So I strongly support that bill, and I hope that we'll do. Thank you.
I'm Bill Rogers. I'm a law teacher at the University of Washington, and my area is environmental law, so I know a bit about the history of these laws. This story that you hear is, among other things, a legal failure. This bill is long overdue, and the reason for the confusion here is that asbestos was banned. It was proposed for banning in 1986 in the Reagan administration. It was banned in 1988 in the Bush administration. What happened was an opportunistic appeal to the Fifth Circuit resulted in an invalidation of the rule. The Fifth Circuit, in the corrosion-proof fittings case, we all know it, held that EPA had not adequately demonstrated what it was supposed to demonstrate in order to get this regulation to stick. I have to tell you, they read this Toxic Substances Control Act, we call it TSCA. They read that as saying, you have to regulate with the weakest measure first, the least adverse regulation. So basically the idea is if you can handle it with a label, don't go so far as a ban. And this court, in a very extreme decision, just to give you a taste of it, I want you to hear it. This is what the court says about regulation and about this regulation. Eager to douse the dangers of asbestos, the agency inadvertently actually may increase the risk of injury Americans face. The way they get to that is to say, hey, who knows what the alternatives will be? They could be worse. This is the same argument that's made against every ban proposal that's ever been undertaken. The chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticides, when they were threatened to be withdrawn, they said, well, we have organophosphates, and they're worse. There'll be something worse waiting for you. But the point was, this became the bottom line. Corrosion-proof fittings is the last word. Functionally, it's the end of regulation under TSCA. The agency's never tried again. They can't meet these burdens. So you have to have these legislative starters and initiators and innovation. It's really important to come back to this. And let me add one additional point. about how these wonderful systems can get waylaid and misdirected. In 1986, Congress enacted, approved an agency called ATSDR. That's the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. That's a wonderful entity within the Public Health Service, and they come in to investigate cancer clusters. They'll come into communities and do your studies that are necessary. You read about them, or you saw the movie in the Civil Action. That was an ATSDR study. There's been one at Libby in Montana that the Senator's been working on very diligently. What has happened extremely recently, and why this is so painful to revisit again and again, there's a criminal case involving exposure and the very significant damages at Libby. What happened was, in motions to the court, this particular study from ATSDR was precluded. And the Justice Department told the Ninth Circuit not a month ago, we can't go ahead with this conviction if you preclude use of the very studies that are designed to disclose these risks. This particular one that was excluded was actually peer-reviewed. So I guess I just conclude by saying what happens is you do get laws, and you do get regulations, and you do get initiatives. And for a variety of reasons, they get waylaid and stuck. The system is very complex. People are always expecting some relief from somewhere else. And that's why when the system gets stuck, it's so important to have a legislator step up and say, let's unstuck it. So asbestos was banned ineffectively. We got to try again.
Thank you very much. You know, like I said, I've been working on this for 6 years. I've met people who were exposed themselves unknowingly when they were working. I have talked to people like you've heard today who were exposed when a spouse brought asbestos-related material home. And it just, every one of them that I meet, I tell them that this should not be. This is a country who's much smarter than that. We know asbestos kills, it should be banned. So we are going to keep working on this because every day someone is exposed to asbestos in this country. Every day a family member loses somebody very important to them. And every day we keep going and importing asbestos into this country and using it in products, and that should not be. So we're going to keep working, and I really appreciate everybody for speaking out today. And with that, I'd like to see if anybody has any questions.
Could we ask Judy, could you explain, Judy, how you were exposed?
Secondhand from my ex-husband. I would wash his clothes, and his clothes would be full of the black stuff, and I was like in no ventilation in a closed place and shaking out his clothes every night.
And he worked for
And he worked at Long Foundry in Hopeland.
And nobody said to him or to you?
No. I wasn't aware of it at all, or I wouldn't be shaking it out.
How old are your sons?
20 and 22.
What is your ex-husband's, has he had health effects?
No, he hasn't. In fact, he went in and got tested, and he's fine so far. But see, he had protection, you know, he wore a mask, ventilation, you know, he had protection. I didn't.
And he had protection because they knew the substance he was using was potentially harmful. Yet his material was on his clothes, he brought it home, and his family was exposed to it. That's a story I've heard many, many times.
Judy, how long ago were you diagnosed?
August of 2006, they wanted to do a biopsy, and that's when they found it.
And can you tell us some of the pains that you feel? Is it any certain part of your body? Is it standing, walking?
I have it in my right lung, and that's usually where my pain is in my right side and like in my lower back. Hard to breathe. Mornings are really painful.
To hear what everybody has talked about here, in particular Bill and Senator, the legislator Senator Murray, about that it was supposed to be banned. The EPA had tried to limit it in, 2 decades ago, and then it failed. You talked about being angry. Does that?
I am angry. I wouldn't be in this position. If they'd known back then, I wouldn't have been shaking those clothes out if I'd known that. Makes me angry. I feel cheated. I didn't, like I said, there's no warning labels on. When my husband would come home, I'd shake out all that stuff. I didn't know what I was breathing in.
And the administration did not appeal that decision at the time.
Doctor, this was something that was in Andy Schneider's piece this morning. I don't know if maybe you can comment on this or not. We, for a number of years, have seen, the mine workers, the Libby mine workers, the Bremerton shipyard workers, that sort of generation of victims of asbestos. Are we seeing sort of a new generation or a next generation of victims coming, like Judy?
Yeah, we are seeing some younger individuals, but the bulk of the patients that we are seeing right now were exposed 35, 40 years ago. And that puts them, back in the 70s. That's still the bulk of what we are seeing right now. They're right at the peak of where the legislation that was passed in the early 70s in the working environment, now we're peaking on this. We're probably going to see another wave down the road, but this is where we are right now. The majority of our patients are in their 60s and their 70s and were exposed 30, 45 years ago.
Can you talk a little bit about that second wave that you expect to see, that we expect to see?
Well, you've read about the 9/11 exposure in New York. That's going to be probably a big thing. There was a lot of asbestos. It's a local problem, sure, but it's going to have a huge national impact just because of the political magnitude of this problem. But 9/11, there was a huge amount of individuals, firefighters and other individuals that were in the area that got exposed to a large amount of asbestos fibers that were in these buildings. And there's still, as Senator Mary said, there's still tons of asbestos out there. It's just that they're not, you're not going to have the shipyard cohort like you used to have. You're going to have mechanics, a couple of mechanics who work in a repair shop. And then there's the individuals who take down buildings here and there. There's a lot of asbestos in these buildings as well. So I don't know exactly what the next wave will be, but we're not going to see that this disease disappear right away. And even if we were able to ban the product from our environment today, I just said 35, 40 years before this thing will be away.
One of the things that we're seeing is that, as the doctors referred to, Bremerton shipyards, for example, was a work site. Libby was a site, so we saw a high exposure there. But the material that was processed in Libby is now in insulation and tiles across the country. Brake pads that have come in are in auto mechanic shops all over everywhere. So doctors may not know when they're seeing someone that the exposure that they've seen is asbestos related and can diagnose mesothelioma. That's one of the reasons why our education campaign is so important, because I don't think it's going to be in the intense locations like we've seen in the past. It's going to be homeowners who go in to remodel an older home, don't know that it has asbestos in the insulation, are exposed, and 20 or 25 or 30 years from now are diagnosed. Who knows where they are, and they have to remember that, oh yeah, 30 years ago I remodeled my house. Or a mechanic, brake mechanic, who 20 years from now, in a totally different city, in a totally different job, has to remember back what he did 20 years ago. So that's one of the reasons why the public education campaign and the research part of our legislation is so important.
Senator, can you describe the resistance to the legislation?
There are many users of asbestos today who don't want to change their habits. And products that use asbestos today have been very reluctant to come to the table. We are seeing those in some of the cement, or what do I call their industry? Sand and gravel folks who are worried about definitions that may in fact impact some of them. Some of the chlorine producing sites are worried about how it'll impact them. I will say Dow Chemical, for the first time since we introduced it, are better at working with us this time and not trying to block it. And they're actually trying to use alternative material that other countries are already using. But industry-related networks have been able to keep this from being passed up until now.
You've been working this a long time, and now for the first time you're actually getting some progress made. What's your real estimate of how long it still could take to have?
Well, I have learned the hard way that the opponents of this legislation who still want to use asbestos and don't seem to care that it has a serious and fatal impact will go to a lot of extremes to stop this legislation. That's why we haven't even gotten it up a committee before. They may not come and testify at a committee, but they are working very hard behind the scenes. So I have been around long enough to know that this is still an uphill battle. The good news is I have a majority of votes on the committee now to get the bill passed. And I believe we'll be able to get it off the Senate floor. The majority leader has said it will be a priority of his to move it. But I also know those who are going to block it are going to find tiny little definitions and weird places to object to it. So I know that this is going to be an intense battle. Then, of course, we have to have House pass it, which I believe we can do, but not sure where the administration is going to come down on whether or not they'll veto it. So legislation is not easy to pass, and this legislation has been extremely difficult, but it is the right thing to do. No one should be telling you the story Judy is. And I can't even fathom 30 years from now, the next senator who's elected at that time is having to stand before a press conference and saying, we tried to ban asbestos 30 years ago and couldn't do it, and now we have hundreds of people who are dying.
Does it make you mad?
Oh, day in and day out. It's so frustrating to me. It seems so common sense. Asbestos kills, we shouldn't use it in this country. And here we are today importing 2,500 metric tons a year, people unknowingly being exposed, and people like Judy who had no idea, who now find themselves with a few months to live. That's just wrong, just wrong.
Judy, how long ago were you exposed, do you think?
70s.
It was in the 70s?
Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Oh, I missed the hug. Sissy, hug her again. I missed the hug. I missed the hug. You want to run this? I want to give her a hug. This is my sister, Deborah. Nice to meet you.
Deborah. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Really
I had no clue what you were doing. You were awesome.
I want you to get by Patty Marie. Here.
Okay, because I lost two of my clients in Aberdeen, a little small town of Aberdeen that I live in. I've died of mesothelioma.
Really?
One of them was younger than her.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, okay, we've got to do this.
Okay.
Thank you. Are these
This
your
is my son,
sons?
Darren.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you so much. I'm really proud of your mom. That's great to think we're going to stand up here. Yeah, we appreciate it.
This is my husband, Richie.
Hello, how are you? Very nice to meet you. Thank you so much. If there's anything that can help with, I can carry it in my heart.
Good.